People don't feel power when you speak. They feel it before you say anything. This is the first truth most people never understand. Powerful presence is not created by words. It's not created by volume. It's not created by confident statements, dominant gestures, or forced charisma. Presence is instinctive. People feel it the way animals sense danger. Before logic has time to interfere, before you introduce yourself, before you speak, before you act, the body knows, the nervous system knows, the room knows, and that's why presence can't be faked for long. Most people try to announce power. They talk more. They interrupt. They dominate conversations. They exaggerate achievements. They over-explain. They perform with confidence. But this behavior does the opposite of what they intend. Because real presence doesn't try to be seen. It is felt. Loud confidence is compensation. Powerful presence is certainty. Loud confidence wants validation. Powerful presence doesn't need it. Loud confidence seeks attention. Powerful presence attracts attention without asking. This is the difference between people who look powerful and people who are powerful. Powerful presence is nonverbal because it comes from internal alignment. It comes from emotional control, self-respect, psychological boundaries, clarity of identity, comfort with silence, absence of neediness. When these qualities are present internally, the body reflects them automatically. Your posture changes, your movements slow, your gaze stabilizes, your reactions become minimal, your energy becomes grounded, and people feel it immediately. Before we go deeper into the psychology of presence, the kind people feel before they hear you, tap like and hit subscribe, because what comes next reveals why real power isn't performed, isn't loud, and isn't spoken. It's sensed the moment you enter the room. Now let's break down the first signs. Sign 1. Room's quiet, slightly when you enter. This is subtle, and that's why it's real. When you walk into a room with powerful presence, the noise doesn't stop dramatically. There's no silence, no spotlight. Instead, something quieter happens. The energy shifts, conversations soften, voices lower slightly, movements slow. People become more aware of themselves. Not because you demand attention, but because your presence creates psychological gravity. People unconsciously register composure, stability, self-control, confidence without performance, and their nervous systems adjust. This isn't intimidation. This is authority without force. Powerful presence doesn't shock the room. It grounds it. That's why this sign often goes unnoticed, except by people who are highly perceptive, and manipulators feel it immediately. Sign 2. People adjust their behavior around you. This is one of the clearest indicators of presence. People don't behave the same way around you as they do around others. They choose words more carefully. They joke less recklessly. They interrupt less. They become more polite without being told. They explain themselves without being asked. Not because you threaten them, but because your presence activates self-awareness. When someone has no presence, people test boundaries. They talk over them. They push limits. They act casually. But when presence is strong, people regulate themselves. This happens instinctively. They don't think, this person is powerful. They feel, I should be more composed around them. And that feeling changes behavior. That's a real influence. Here's the key psychological insight. People only adjust themselves around someone they subconsciously respect. Respect doesn't always look like admiration. Sometimes it looks like caution. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like silence. But it's always there, and it has nothing to do with titles, status, or dominance displays. It comes from internal authority. Identity activation happens here. Once you realize that presence is not something you perform, but something others react to. You stop chasing external signals of power. You stop trying to impress. You stop filling silence. You stop over-explaining. You stop forcing engagement. You begin to occupy space calmly instead of performing inside it. And that's when presence strengthens. Because presence grows when you stop interfering with it. Powerful presence creates gravity, not the kind that demands attention, the kind that pulls it. People don't lean in because you ask them to. They lean in because something about you feels solid, centered, and unmoved. This is psychological gravity, and it cannot be faked. Most people try to capture attention through effort. They talk louder. They exaggerate emotion. They perform with confidence. They seek validation through reactions. But powerful presence does the opposite. It reduces effort and increases impact. Why? Because gravity doesn't chase objects. Objects move toward gravity. Presence works the same way. When you are emotionally grounded, internally calm, and psychologically self-contained, people begin to orient themselves around you without realizing it. They watch you. They wait for your response. They adjust based on your reactions. Not because you asked, but because their nervous system decided you matter. Here is the truth most people miss. Attention follows stability. Influence follows composure. Authority follows emotional control. Presence creates gravity because it signals safety and strength at the same time. Your calm says, "I'm not threatened." Your silence says, "I'm not seeking approval." Your restraint says, "I'm not desperate to be seen." And that combination is rare. Sign 3. People seek your reaction more than your approval. This is one of the clearest signs of psychological gravity. When you have powerful presence, people stop trying to impress you and start watching how you respond. They look at your face after they speak. They pause to see if you agree. They subtly check your reaction before continuing. They adjust their tone based on your silence. This is not admiration. This is orientation. They are subconsciously asking, "Did that land? Did I go too far? Did they approve? Did they notice?" You become the reference point, and notice the difference. Approval seekers chase reactions. Powerful presence becomes the reaction people chase. You don't nod excessively. You don't interrupt to validate. You don't rush to reassure. And because you don't rush, your reaction gains weight. A small nod matters more. A brief comment carries authority. A pause speaks louder than explanation. This is why leaders with presence speak less and are heard more. Your reaction becomes valuable because it is rare. Sign 4. Your silence makes others uncomfortable. This is where psychological gravity becomes obvious. When you're comfortable with silence, others often aren't. They start talking more. They over-explain. They justify themselves. They fill space unnecessarily. They reveal more than they intended, not because you pressured them, but because your silence removed the social crutch they rely on. Most people use noise to feel safe. They use talking to regulate anxiety. They use constant engagement to avoid self-awareness. But your silence forces awareness. It slows the interaction. It removes emotional momentum. It makes intentions visible. And people feel exposed. so they talk. Here's the dark psychological truth. Silence shifts the burden of meaning onto the other person. When you don't rush to fill space, the other person feels responsible for maintaining the interaction. And that reveals a lot. Insecurity shows itself through nervous talking. Ego shows itself through boasting. Manipulation shows itself through urgency. Neediness shows itself through over-validation. Your silence doesn't create discomfort. It reveals what was already there. This is why emotionally weak people struggle around powerful presence. Why weak people talk more around powerful presence. Weakness here doesn't mean unintelligent. It means emotionally unregulated. People who lack internal stability feel unsettled around someone who has it. They feel observed, measured, slowed down, unable to dominate the interaction. So they compensate. They talk more to regain control. They joke more to lower tension. They overshare to feel connection. They perform to reclaim relevance. But none of it works, because powerful presence doesn't compete. It waits. And waiting is threatening to people who rely on momentum. This is why emotionally strong individuals often say very little, and emotionally unstable ones say too much. The imbalance creates gravity. Here's the key insight. Powerful presence does not push energy outward. It pulls energy inward. People come toward it. They seek alignment with it. They want to know where they stand with it. And the less you chase engagement, the more engagement chases you. This is where identity begins to lock in. When you realize that silence is not emptiness. Restraint is not weakness. Stillness is not passivity. You stop performing presence. You stop trying to control the room. You stop filling gaps. You stop proving anything. You let gravity do the work, and gravity always wins. Repeat these affirmations slowly. I do not chase attention. I allow attention to come to me. My silence has weight. My reactions are intentional. My presence pulls without effort. I am grounded, centered, and unmoved. Psychological gravity works in my favor. Authority is rarely loud. It doesn't rush. It doesn't react impulsively. It doesn't fight for dominance. Authority is calm. This is why emotional control signals superiority at a psychological level. Not because calm people are emotionless, but because they are in control of their internal world. And control is power. Most people believe authority comes from confidence, volume, or force. But those are surface signals. At a deeper level, the human nervous system reads something else. Who remains regulated when pressure rises? The person who stays calm during chaos is instantly perceived as higher status. Why? Because calmness communicates three things simultaneously. I am not threatened. I do not need to react. I am in control of myself. And anyone who controls themselves is assumed to be capable of controlling outcomes. This is why emotional control is authority without effort. If this is changing how you understand silence, restraint, and presence, tap like and hit subscribe. Your support matters because it allows this message to reach people who are ready to stop performing confidence and start embodying power. Let's continue with the signs. Sign 5. You stay calm while others escalate. This sign appears most clearly in moments of tension. Conflict, pressure, urgency, disagreement, emotional spikes. When emotions rise, most people rise with them. They talk faster. They defend harder. They explain more. They react emotionally. They lose composure. But if you have powerful presence, something different happens. You slow down. Your voice remains steady. Your breathing stays controlled. Your words become fewer. Your reactions soften instead of sharpen. And the contrast becomes obvious. The more others escalate, the more your calm stands out. This creates instant hierarchy, not because you dominate, but because you outlast the emotional surge. Emotionally escalated people lose credibility. Calm people gain it. This is why calmness is perceived as intelligence, and intelligence is perceived as authority. You don't need to win the argument. Your composure already won the room. There's an important psychological shift here. People stop arguing with you and start explaining to you. They justify. They clarify. They seek reassurance. They slow themselves down because your calm forces them to regulate. And whoever regulates the emotional temperature of the room holds authority in that room. Sign 6. You are hard to read. Emotionally. This is where emotional control becomes strategic power. When people cannot read your emotional state easily, they cannot anticipate your response. And unpredictability creates hierarchy. You don't reveal irritation immediately. You don't show excitement prematurely. You don't display anxiety openly. You don't broadcast approval or disapproval. Instead, your emotional state stays neutral, measured, contained, unclear. This forces others to guess. And when people guess, they defer. They speak more carefully. They choose words intentionally. They pause before acting. They hesitate before pushing boundaries because they don't know where they stand. This isn't manipulation. It's psychological structure. Unreadability creates distance. Distance creates respect. Here's the key insight. The more emotionally readable you are, the easier you are to manage. The harder you are to read, the more others manage themselves around you. This is why leaders, judges, strategists, and people with natural authority rarely display exaggerated emotion, not because they feel less, but because they understand the cost of exposure. How unreadability creates hierarchy. Hierarchy is not created by force. It is created by uncertainty. When people don't know how you'll respond, they assume the response matters. They become cautious. They regulate themselves. They avoid crossing lines. But when someone is emotionally transparent, others feel free to test boundaries. They joke more. They push limits. They take liberties. Emotional openness without control invites familiarity. Familiarity reduces authority. Emotional control with restraint invites respect. And respect establishes hierarchy. This is why people with powerful presence are often described as composed, grounded, intimidating without aggression, calm but intense, quiet but authoritative. Their authority isn't in what they do. It's in what they don't do. They don't react impulsively. They don't overshare. They don't chase validation. They don't collapse under pressure. And people feel that. This is where identity shifts from expressive to embodied. You stop believing that authority comes from being heard. You stop thinking calmness means weakness. You stop equating emotion with authenticity. You begin to understand. Regulation is power. Restraint is authority. Calmness is dominance without noise. You allow emotions to exist internally, without letting them control your behavior. You choose response over reaction, presence over performance, control over expression. And once that shift happens, people feel it before they understand it. Respect is not requested, it is not negotiated, and it is never forced. Respect is a response. People don't decide to respect you logically. They feel it instinctively, based on how you carry yourself, regulate yourself, and occupy space. This is why power changes social dynamics without effort. Most people are tested constantly. Their boundaries are pushed. Their words are questioned. Their decisions are challenged. Their authority is undermined. And they think this is normal. It's not. People test those who lack presence because testing feels safe around them. They sense emotional availability. They sense uncertainty. They sense reactivity. They sense the ability to provoke a response. Testing is not random. It is diagnostic. People test to see what they can get away with, and when presence is weak, testing increases. Powerful presence removes the invitation. You don't signal availability for disrespect. You don't signal tolerance for chaos. You don't signal fear of conflict. You don't signal emotional volatility. So people don't test. They adjust. Sign 7. People rarely test or disrespect you. This is one of the clearest signs that presence has shifted. People don't tease you casually. They don't interrupt you mid-sentence. They don't push your boundaries as a joke. They don't talk over you. They don't challenge you publicly, not because you're aggressive, but because something about you discourages it. This discouragement is not intimidation. It's implicit authority. Implicit authority comes from consistency. You are consistent in your tone, consistent in your reactions, consistent in your boundaries, consistent in your self-respect. And consistency tells the nervous system, this person is not chaotic. This person is not safe to test. So people don't. They self-regulate. There's an important psychological shift here. When people stop testing you, they start respecting you, even if they never say it. Respect often appears as restraint, not praise. It shows up as caution, politeness, measured language, emotional regulation, subtle distance, and that distance is not rejection. It is an acknowledgement. Sign 8. Your words carry weight, even when few. When presence is strong, you don't need many words. In fact, the fewer you use, the more each one matters. You speak slowly. You pause naturally. You don't rush to explain. You don't stack arguments. You don't over-justify. And because you don't overshare, people listen more carefully. Your words land differently. A short sentence carries authority. A calm observation shifts direction. A simple no ends discussion. A brief agreement settles tension. This is not charisma. This is weight. Words only carry weight when they are rare. People who speak constantly dilute their influence. People who speak selectively concentrate on it. Here's the psychological truth. When someone speaks less, but remains fully present, the brain assigns importance to their words. Scarcity creates value, and powerful presence makes silence feel intentional, not awkward. So when you finally speak, people pay attention. Now, the dark psychology of implicit authority. Implicit authority is the highest form of power. It doesn't rely on titles. It doesn't rely on threats. It doesn't rely on dominance displays. It relies on expectation. People expect you to be composed. They expect you to be grounded. They expect you to respond deliberately. They expect you to maintain standards. And because of those expectations, they behave differently around you. This is why implicit authority feels invisible. But its effects are unmistakable. People correct themselves mid-sentence. They rethink jokes. They choose words more carefully. They slow their behavior, not because you demanded it, but because your presence made disrespect feel out of place. This is where power becomes effortless. You are no longer enforcing boundaries. You are embodying them. You are no longer commanding respect. You are receiving it. And that is the difference between performance and presence. At this stage, the pattern is clear. Presence stops testing. Calmness establishes authority. Silence increases impact. Consistency earns respect. Restraint reshapes behavior. You don't control people. You control yourself, and people respond. This is respect without effort, and it is far more powerful than any loud display of dominance. There is a moment when something fundamental shifts. You stop trying to project power. You stop managing impressions. You stop measuring yourself through reactions. You stop asking whether you're being seen, heard, or respected. And without effort, presence settles into you. This is not a performance. It is not a confidence theater. It is not dominance. It is the embodiment. Powerful presence is not something you switch on. It is something you become when your inner state and outer behavior finally align. The psychological shift is subtle but permanent. You no longer rush to speak. You no longer explain yourself reflexively. You no longer react to emotional bait. You no longer compete for attention. You no longer chase validation. You move slower. You listen more. You choose responses carefully. You allow silence to do work. And people feel it immediately. Not because you changed your behavior consciously, but because your nervous system stopped broadcasting need. Let's lock in what presence looks like when it is fully embodied. You've already seen the signs. Rooms quiet slightly when you enter. Not dramatically, instinctively. People adjust their behavior around you. They become more measured without knowing why. They seek your reaction more than your approval. Your response becomes a reference point. Your silence makes others uncomfortable. Not because it's aggressive, but because it removes emotional crutches. You stay calm while others escalate. Your regulation outlasts their intensity. You are hard to read emotionally, which forces others to regulate themselves. People rarely test or disrespect you, because testing feels inappropriate in your presence. Your words carry weight, even when few, because silence has already done the work. None of these signs require force. None require dominance displays. None require explanation. They emerge when identity solidifies. Here's the truth most people never accept. Powerful presence appears when you stop trying to be powerful. Trying creates tension. Tension creates leakage. Leakage invites testing. But when you stop trying, your behavior becomes clean. Your emotions become regulated. Your boundaries become implicit. Your energy becomes grounded. And grounding creates authority. This is why powerful presence repels manipulators. Manipulators rely on emotional hooks. They rely on urgency. They rely on guilt. They rely on reactions. They rely on predictability. But embodied presence offers none of that. You don't react quickly. You don't justify yourself emotionally. You don't explain excessively. You don't rush decisions. You don't reveal internal states. So manipulators feel exposed. They sense that. Pressure won't work. Guilt won't land. Urgency won't move you. Emotional escalation won't control you. And because manipulators avoid environments where they can't control outcomes, they withdraw, not in anger, in discomfort. This is how presence protects you, without confrontation. At the same time, presence attracts respect. Not admiration, not approval. Respect. Because respect comes from perceived stability. People respect those who regulate themselves, don't chase reactions, don't over-explain, don't react impulsively, don't collapse under pressure. They trust those people instinctively, and trust changes social dynamics. People listen more, they speak carefully, they defer naturally, they avoid crossing lines, not because they were told to, but because their nervous system told them to. This is the final identity lock-in. You stop being a presence. You start being a presence. You occupy space without apology. You speak without urgency. You remain calm without effort. You respond instead of react. You let silence breathe. And the world adjusts. If this message showed you why real power is felt before it's heard, tap like and hit subscribe. And comment this below. I embody power without announcing it. Because when your presence becomes stable, your silence gains weight, and the room adjusts without you asking.